Welcome back to the show. I'm so excited to have Barbara Walsh with us here today. And we were just having a little chat before we started recording, and kind of the perspective of when you're diagnosed with something, especially if it's something that's major or something that we've been led to believe that you need to act right away. And this can be a time where it's hard to look at other options. It's hard to see that there are other things you can do. And what I'm talking about here is cancer. And I know my experience in the past, I've had a friend that was diagnosed, and it's like when you're led to believe that if you don't act now, if you don't get chemo now, you're going to die. It's not the time to start exploring other things. So we want to provide you as a show and as a group of practitioners the understanding before this becomes a thing so that you can maybe make some different decisions in the future and feel more prepared. So, thank you so much, Barbara, for joining us today.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Amazing. Well, can you start us off with telling us a little bit about your story?
Okay, as you guys know, I'm a health coach, and back in 2016, I went to the doctor for my annual mammogram. And it honestly, I wasn't a health coach at that time, so let me preface that. And I had no thought in my mind that going in for this annual mammogram would be different than any other year. I thought I would just go in, get my mammogram, leave, and that would be the end of it. And then this time was very different. They saw something suspicious. Then they said, oh gosh, you got to go for a biopsy. So
Mhm.
very compliant patient that I had always been. I was like, okay, I got to go figure it out, see what's going on. And then I went for the biopsy. And then they told me, guess what? You've got breast cancer.
Wow.
And, you know, what you were mentioning about there's an urgency that
Mhm.
comes in when you're handed this type of diagnosis. Not only that, but there's a real atmosphere of fear that gets fostered in that moment because first of all, you're terrified.
Mhm.
You can't believe what they're telling you. You don't even have a second to wrap your head around what that means. For myself, I just kept trying to figure out, like how the heck did this even happen? My mother didn't have breast cancer. None of my I'm one of three girls.
Mhm.
None of my sisters had breast cancer, so I didn't have that textbook family history of the disease. So honestly, prior, it never, ever, ever really occurred to me that I would be at risk. It just
Wow.
never occurred to me. I mean, it probably sounds naive, but that's how I felt. It never occurred to me. And I remember talking to the doctor, and she was actually like, the top breast oncologist and surgeon in my area.
Mhm.
And I remember asking her, I said, how did this happen to me? And, she looked at me and she gave me this answer that just was so dissatisfying. She looked at me and she said, you know, it's hard to say because, you're not obese and, you don't have that, first generation family history. And
Mhm.
so, all I could say is it's probably bad luck, luck of the cards. And I thought to myself, seriously, is that all you have for me? Luck of the cards. There's
Not an
got to be
answer.
something else. Like it's like a non-answer. It was like the
Yeah.
most ridiculous answer. And I felt like it totally pulled the rug out of the confidence that I had in my doctor at that moment. And as I said, prior to that, I was always very compliant. I would be a person like, doctor said it, I would do
Mhm.
it. Take this medicine, I would take it. I would never even question it because they're the expert. But I thought to myself, this is supposed to be an expert in a highly specialized area
Mhm.
that's, dealing with a potentially life-threatening disease. They should know. And I thought,
Yeah.
if they don't know, how are they ever really going to get to the root of the problem here and help me to get better, you know?
Mhm. Mhm.
So as we talked more, the fear was mounting and the pressure was mounting. There is so much pressure when you're diagnosed with cancer because they
Mhm.
just look at you and they just tell you, you get this sense of urgency. Like, if you don't get into surgery tomorrow and you don't start chemo the day after that, for an indefinite amount of time, you will die. That is the pretty much the overriding message of no matter what no matter what else the conversation has to
So this is just from the doctors themselves, or was this
oh yeah.
family as well?
I was fortunate because my husband is a non-compliant patient. He's the kind of guy, he's probably your typical male, like he doesn't like to go
Yeah.
to the doctor and he's like, I don't know if I want to do that and I'm not going to be pushed into doing anything. That's
Mhm,
the kind of guy he is. So he was very supportive of whatever I guess I wanted to do.
mhm,
And so but it was interesting because, you know, when they do a biopsy, they put markers in your body. So in theory, when you do go for your lumpectomy or whatever
mhm,
surgery you go for, there's an area, a target area, so they could find where they found the suspicious cell activity. And so my husband said to the doctor, "Okay, so what is it? What do we need to do here?" And the doctor said, "Well, you're going to go for, you know, a lumpectomy, and then that's what I would recommend. And then we're going to go into chemo. We're going to do 8 rounds of chemo, and we're going to do 6 months of radiation, and you're going to go
mhm,
on tamoxifen pretty much indefinitely because I had an estrogen positive breast cancer." And so my husband said, "Okay, so if my wife does all these things, will she be cured?" And the doctor said, "Well, there are no guarantees. We'll consider this to be a success if there's no recurrence of disease within 5 years."
mhm,
So
Wow.
that gave me a lot of pause when she said that because I thought, if there's no, you know, no risk of recurrence. And then I started thinking about, you know, even as a person who had no medical training, I knew that there was risks associated with chemo. I
Hmm.
know that it's pretty toxic, and I know that radiation is associated, you know, that's radiation. We know what that is. Everybody knows that's toxic. I mean, think about it. You go to the dentist and you get like a tiny little area of your tooth, right? The tech comes, they throw the vest on you, they
mhm.
run out of the room for dear life,
Hmm.
and then they hit the button from like outside because
Yes.
they
Yeah.
don't want to be exposed, right? So I was thinking about that. And that's like for what, 2 seconds when they go to the dentist. We
Hmm.
were talking about, and my breast cancer had been on the left side of my body. We were
Mhm,
talking about, you know, concentrated radiation on the left breast for, you know, 6 months or probably every week for 6 months. And so I started thinking about all of this exposure, and I didn't know it at the time, but I found out later that tamoxifen is known to cause uterine cancer.
Hmm.
So as I was thinking about all these things, like I couldn't agree to any treatment protocols at that day, which really annoyed my doctor because I just couldn't sign on. I was like, I can't. I have to. And she was pretty adamant that that's what it would be. And I said, well, I
mhm,
have to think about it. And so I actually had thought even about mastectomy
Hmm.
mhm,
because my husband had said, well, what happens with the lumpectomy? You're just going to go in the area where those markers are, right? And take that little area. And she said, well, we don't know. We're going to take an area and then we're going to look at it under a microscope and then we'll decide if we need to take more. And that's kind of how the process will be until we feel comfortable that
wow,
we've gotten, quote unquote, we've gotten it all.
Hmm.
And so I guess I'm pretty vain, but I kept thinking to myself, I could go in there and come out without a breast.
mhm,
Even if it starts out as a
A little bit.
lumpectomy,
mhm,
Hmm.
there's no reason why they couldn't potentially take the whole.
mhm,
And then the other thing that really pushed me over the edge and out the door that day was because she said, and then while we're in there, we're probably going to take your lymph nodes out of the
wow,
armpit area on the left
Hmm.
side. And
yes,
so this is going to go way back, but when I was younger, you know, cancer was always a scary thing. You always hear about it. It was always this
yeah,
looming thing, and nobody knows what's going to happen. It's like the boogeyman under the bed. Is it going to like jump out, like kill me at any moment? And I just can't do anything about it. And I remember at that time, I heard a woman speak, and she was a doctor. Her name is Dr. Lorraine Day. You guys may have heard of her or no, but she was actually a well respected doctor.
Hmm.
And she ended up diagnosed with breast cancer. And she had a very large tumor formation that actually protruded out of her chest. So she
mhm,
almost had like 3 breasts because of this tumor.
wow,
And so she had to have it drained. And she basically, I guess she had a little more pull because she was in the medical community, but she basically told her team, look, you cannot take out my you could drain that, but you're not taking any tissue and you're not going to take out any lymph nodes. And I thought, that's weird. And she had said, and if anybody ever tries to take your lymph nodes, don't let them take them.
Hmm.
And I thought, I didn't understand what that meant. And she said, and the reason why is because they're actually a part of your immune system. And that was like something I had never heard. I didn't
Mhm.
know about that. And and she said, even if you are facing cancer, the one thing you're going to need is your immune system. You
Hmm.
don't want to cut it out because once you
Mhm.
cut it out, it doesn't grow back. It just is gone.
Yes.
And so that kind of was in the back of my head. So when she told me she was going to take my lymph nodes, I was like, no, I can't. I cannot do it. I'm not letting you take my lymph nodes. So we went home, my husband and I, and we're Christians. So I need to pray because I was scared. I mean, I talk now like it's nothing. I was scared
Yeah.
witless. I was crazy scared because it was like the most life-altering event that I had ever experienced. It was ever experienced, the most terrifying thing I had
Hmm.
ever faced. And so as I was spending time at home, weighing my options, I was praying a lot and I was actually waiting to go to like the cancer mecca in my area, which is in New York City, well
Hmm.
known. And I just couldn't get in there. I had to wait. And it actually turned out to be a blessing
Mhm.
because in that time period, it gave me time. I got to process what I was facing and I got to do some research. And the stuff that I found out on my own, even as a person who has no medical background, I just learned this amazing stuff. Like I learned that you guys probably know this, but maybe your audience doesn't know this. Did you know that it can take up to 10 years for cancer to grow in the body before it could even be detected on any type of diagnostic scan of any type or even felt?
Mhm.
10 years. And so when I was rolling that around in my head, I started thinking about what my doctor said. And my doctor was like, well, success would be no recurrence within 5 years. And I thought, well, first of all, this thing has been growing in my body for 10 years and I was
Yeah.
clueless about it. I didn't know. And then strangely, that kind of put the ball in my court because I had to like take a look, well, if it, if it had been growing for 10 years, how was that happening and how was I unaware, right?
Hmm.
And then I started thinking about, that 5-year mark on her plan that my doctor was giving me. And I thought, well, it took 10 years to grow. And I thought, well, you know, if I did absolutely nothing, there was a good bet that would be another 10 years before the cancer would grow to the next stage. So
Mhm.
I had like 5 years, 10 years, and I thought, this is a crapshoot because there are no guarantees if I go
Yeah.
conventional anyway. There
Yes.
just aren't. And my doctor clearly stated that.
Yeah.
And so I started to investigate, like, how the heck did this happen? And that's when I learned that, the reason why, cancer has, like I was saying earlier, cancer is not outside of our bodies.
Hmm.
It's not like something like viral or bacterial, like COVID. Like you could go outside and come into contact with COVID. It's not in you.
Yeah.
Cancer could be in you at any moment. And that
Mhm.
like blew my mind because it's actually part of, it can become introduced as part of our body's own cell turnover because you
Hmm.
guys know, our bodies have like a gajillion cells and that's the exact amount. But right.
Yeah.
That's what they say in the literature right now.
Yeah.
We have a gazillion cells, right? And then they're constantly turning over. I mean, cells get old, cells get damaged. And
Hmm.
and what happens to those cells? Well, it's the job of our immune system to like root those guys out, get rid of them. And then what's the job of the lymph node? It's to trap those suckers so that they could be removed from the body, right?
Hmm.
And so when your immune system is not functioning properly, or you're living with like other underlying diseases, or you have tons of inflammation in your body,
Mhm.
your immune system is just spread so thin. You just
Yeah.
don't have enough. You just don't have enough SWAT members in your surveillance team to like go around and like get the stuff. And that's what happens. Then cancer like slips through the cracks and then
Mhm.
it starts to replicate and grow because it doesn't want to cooperate with the normal process of cell renewal. And
Yeah.
so when I learned that, I thought, wow, this has been going on. So like clearly I have compromised immunity. I know that's a big term that we've heard since COVID, but it applies in this case too, because if my immune system wasn't compromised, I wouldn't have been diagnosed with cancer in the first place.
That's
Hmm.
right.
So what causes that? That was my next mission. Okay, so how did I how did I end up here? And that's when I learned, well, what strengthens the immune system, and conversely, what's the thing that's going to weaken it? And it had with my dietary choices,
Hmm.
the way I managed stress or the way I didn't manage stress. It had so much to do with things that were in my control. And I think that's an interesting point for people to learn, because most of the time you talk to people, they say, well, cancer is a genetic disease, and I guess that's probably what I used to think, because that's why I thought, well, I didn't have that family history, so I
Yeah.
wasn't at risk. Even the World Health Organization classifies cancer as a lifestyle disease. So what does that mean? It means what we do has an effect, and it
Mm.
makes a difference every single
And
day.
that we have
Yeah.
control to do something different.
We totally have control. And as I learned all this stuff, I started, I was thinking about this idea of maybe not doing something conventional. And I met this woman who had been diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer 20 years prior to my diagnosis at the time. And that amazed me, because I never knew anyone who had been diagnosed with any type of cancer who lived 20 years. And not only that, if they had, I didn't know one person who was thriving. This
Mhm.
woman was thriving. She was actually going around, telling people there's a better way. And
Yeah.
so I spoke with her, and she was so encouraging. I loved her. She told me all the nuts and bolts of her story. And she said this thing to me, which was like a game changer. She said, whatever you decide, just think about this. You probably have more time than your doctors are telling you, because of, there's that whole pressure, like you got to get into treatment tomorrow, right?
Hmm.
She said, you probably have a little more time than that. And she said, you know what? If you decide to go with something natural and it doesn't work for you, you can always go back. You can always get surgery. You can always get chemo. You can always get radiation. They will never, ever turn you away or tell you no.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And I thought to myself, wow, great plan B. And I thought to
Yeah.
myself, it just made so much sense, like to do things like nourish my body so I could support my body's own innate ability to heal. That's like built into every single one of us.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Than it did to like bombard my body with all these toxic poisons, hoping maybe I'd get well. And
Yeah.
so that's what I did. I went the natural route. I went hardcore, and I went all in. I made massive changes that were
Hmm.
not me, because prior to all of this, like I said, I wasn't aware. I didn't care about what I ate, other than did it taste good?
Mhm.
It never really occurred to me that dietary choices I was making every single day were going to impact my body in one way. It could be a positive impact or a negative. That
Mhm.
concept was just so far from my own personal experience. I wasn't raised in a family like that. I was just a regular person, you know? And so I just decided I changed all those things. I learned about, toxicity, which is a huge deal as
Hmm.
far as, compromising your immune system and the way your body
Mhm.
functions. It's like the root of like so many problems out there. And so I made a concerted effort to detoxify my body naturally, doing it all with food and juicing and stuff like that, changing the way I manage my stress, using natural things like, herbs and vitamins and stuff like that, things that have been maybe in Ayurvedic medicine, or,
Mhm.
Native American medicine for like eons, Chinese medicine, stuff like that. And then I went back 6 months later. I went back because they wanted to see me again.
Hmm.
I got rescreened. I didn't agree to the mammogram that second time. I hate to say, but I didn't. But but they did rescreen me, and they really couldn't find the cancer in my breast anymore. So at that point,
Wow.
they gave me the NED, which is what any cancer patient wants to hear, which is no evidence of disease.
Fantastic.
And as of January this year, I'm going on 8 years cancer free now. So I'm
That's
way
amazing.
beyond that 5 year mark that my oncologist gave me initially. So
Yeah.
so yeah. So I think I don't know, it's kind of crazy. I have to say I wasn't like brave. I didn't go out and say to everybody, "Hey, I've been diagnosed with cancer. I'm doing this really weird thing." I didn't do
Hmm.
that. I figured I was going to kind of do what that woman said. I was going to try it and see if it worked. And I thought, you know what? Even if it didn't work, my other part of that taking that track was to try to get my body in a better state to withstand some kind of crazy treatment like chemo. I figured if it couldn't hurt me to get stronger if I was going to
Yeah.
actually go that route, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
And so it was cool though, because as I went through that process, everything I learned, I implemented, and my body actually started changing. I felt my body literally change. You could see my body changing. And another factor of that was that when I was diagnosed, I had just entered menopause, and I was a person who, one of the lucky girls who put on a ton of weight, pretty common when you hit menopause. I had gained like 30 pounds, couldn't get that off.
Mm-hmm.
And I was, prior to all of this, I was one of those people. I would diet, I would starve myself if need be, if I had to drop weight, whatever. Any of those old practices that used to work for me didn't work anymore once I hit menopause. So I had like this extra 30 pounds I was carrying around.
Mm-hmm.
As I changed everything, detoxified my body, changed the way I ate, that weight came off all on its own, just like without even trying, which was like a total bonus. Not the goal, what I was trying to do at the time, but it was like a bonus. And like people started saying to me like, "Oh my gosh, what are you doing? What are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I got into cleansing, I got into detox," and we just kind of give them a high overview.
Yeah.
But after I got that, and every time I would make a change and I would feel the impact on my body, my energy returned. I started looking better, feeling better. Every time something worked, I kept saying to myself, why didn't anybody tell me any of this? If I had known, I am 100% confident that I could have avoided breast cancer in the first place.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's my story in more than a nutshell, I know, but
It's amazing though. There's so many pieces to that. Like we talked about detox was one of the biggest things that was helpful for you. And I mean, the body doesn't want to hold on to weight. That's the first thing we're always trying to say to people. And if there is a weight problem, like we don't specifically focus on weight loss with clients,
Mhm.
but when we clean up your body
Mhm.
and your body can heal naturally, the weight goes away.
Yeah.
Because if you're holding toxins in your fat cells to protect yourself, it's not that you need to go and be a slave to the treadmill and you need to go and like eat nothing all of the time. You need to clean up your system.
Yeah.
And interesting that detox was such a huge benefit for you in so many different ways. And then if you look at chemo, what is it doing?
Mhm.
It's
Toxic.
poisoning you,
Yes, totally.
right?
Totally.
And so the 5 years, I mean, you've exceeded the 5 years now. And interesting, I like that you brought up the tamoxifen as well, how that's like a common strategy. And it's like, okay, well, in 5 years, if the breast cancer hasn't come back, it's considered a success.
Correct.
That doesn't mean that if there isn't cancer somewhere else in the body.
Yep.
And that's not discussed.
No, it's so true. And you
Yeah.
know what? That's actually also true. This is probably going to get me in trouble with some people, but that's also true about surgery.
Hmm.
Just because you
Mhm.
remove, I mean, granted, there are cases where, there might be a tumor formation or something that's blocking, an important organ or a duct or something like that in your body where it has to be removed. But
Hmm.
just because you remove that tumor does not guarantee that it's not going to come back. It does not guarantee that it's not going to show up someplace else in your body.
Yeah.
And same thing about chemo. Like chemo, it's a long history, but chemo was actually discovered in World War II, I believe, because it was a weapon. It was
Mhm.
like a bio
Mustard
weapon.
gas, wasn't it?
Yes, it
Yep.
was
I believe
mustard.
so.
Exactly. And so what they found when they dropped chemo on people and then they would examine the bodies after they were dead, they found that, oh wow, it shrunk cancer cells. And yeah, chemo will shrink cancer cells, but it doesn't get to the heart of that, which is actually what they call the stem cell of the cancer.
Hmm.
What it does is it puts it to sleep for a while. And then, but unfortunately, once it's been exposed to that chemo later down the line, probably like after that 5-year mark, it's going to wake up. And
Mhm.
usually when it does, it spreads like wildfire, which is why I don't think it's coincidental that you hear these stories about people like they get diagnosed, they go through conventional treatment, they're fine, and then, oh my gosh, so
Mhm.
many years later, it's back.
Yeah.
But now it's like everywhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Because you never handled why it was there in the first place.
Exactly. And
Yes.
that's the biggest, that's the biggest misconception out there, and you know, I think that medical practitioners do a disservice to their conventional practitioners do a disservice to their patients because, you know, they're not, when you go into these treatments, you're not completely fully informed. You're
Hmm.
not really informed about all the risks. You're not really informed about, the potential adverse reactions that could happen. You're
Mhm.
just not really fully informed. You're not getting the whole picture. And I think that that's kind of a sad thing. We were talking a little earlier, like when you go in, if you've been diagnosed with any type of cancer, it really doesn't matter. It could be breast, it could be colon, it could be any kind of cancer. It's always going to be standard of care is surgery, radiation, chemo, and then probably some other types of drugs. In my case, it was tamoxifen, but that's
Hmm.
always going to be the standard of care. And sadly, that whole strategy is a strategy that totally devastates your immune system because of that toxicity that we were talking about. And then, like in cases of like radiation, I mean, literally, you're burning your tissue is completely burned away,
Yeah.
you know, and what happens is and then if they cut your lymph nodes out, which I mentioned before, they're always going to cut your lymph nodes out. Like you always hear that, right? They're like, oh my gosh, I hope it doesn't spread to the lymph nodes. And that used to be my thought. Oh God, I hope not. But
Yeah.
now I understand that you're always going to find it in lymph nodes. Why? Because that's their job. Their job is
Mhm.
to trap, your lymphatic system. The job is to move throughout the body, grab the junk, put it into the lymph nodes, filter it out so it can be removed. So when you think about that logically, you're going to find it there. And
Hmm.
if you cut out your lymph nodes, you have no way of removing it later
Mhm.
on. So it's like this it puts these people in like it puts a person in like a terrible situation because it's almost like you go through a treatment thinking you're going to get better, but basically what you're doing is you're sabotaging your body's ability to recover from that
Yes.
treatment.
Or you're telling, I make the analogy all the time, like you can't remove the smoke alarm from the house and think that that's going to fix the fact that it was going off.
Yeah.
It's trying to tell you that there's a fire somewhere and you're saying,
Mhm.
shh, be quiet,
Yeah, yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
right? And that's the lymph nodes. That's the immune system. Tonsils. Anytime anything immune related is removed, it's like you're just silencing the alarm. You're not fixing
Mhm.
the problem.
Oh, absolutely.
And then the
Abs and
fire keeps burning.
yeah, and I think it's kind of weird. Weird. I mean, I never thought of it prior to my whole experience, but
Mhm.
I know when I was a kid, I always heard about kids getting their tonsils taken out. And like I think one of the most
Mhm.
common surgeries is like to get the gallbladder removed or to
Yep.
remove your spleen, like something or even your appendix. Now, granted, there are times when the appendix is too far gone, but all of those, well, not necessarily the gallbladder, but like the tonsils, the
Mhm.
appendix, the spleen, those are integral
All
parts
immune.
of your
Hmm.
immune system. Every
Yeah.
one of them, they serve a purpose. I was just talking to my one of my nephews. He lives out in Texas, and he had to go rush to a surgery, and they had to take out his appendix. And he was like, when I saw him, I said, "How are you doing?" He said, "I'm okay." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Yeah, it's all right. I'm sure I didn't need it anyway." And I just looked at him and I said, "Rye, I got to tell you, if it's in there, you need it."
There's a reason.
There for a reason.
It's there. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
God put us together in a certain way for a reason.
absolutely. And, I
Yeah.
think it's really interesting too, like when you realize that how amazingly our
Hmm.
bodies are designed to work synergistically, all the pieces work synergistically. I think that's interesting what you were saying, Kate, about, the alarm going off in your body, because in that 10-year period prior to my diagnosis,
Hmm.
you know, I was constantly battling weird symptoms. Like for a
Mhm.
whole 10-year stretch, I had things like rashes, I had things like UTIs constantly. Sorry if
Mhm.
we just met, but
Sorry.
UTIs,
This is our life.
yeast infections, headaches, sinus infections.
Mhm.
I would catch every cold there was. And it was like this repetitive cycle that was constantly going on. And, compliant patient that I was in and out of my doctor's office
Yeah.
constantly with the
Mhm.
same complaints
Hmm.
over and over and over again. And, they would look at me and they would test me and they'd say, oh, there's nothing going on. You're fine. You're fine. You're in range. You're good. And then they
Mhm.
would write me a prescription for some kind of
Antibiotic.
acillin,
Mm-hmm.
acillin, some kind of thing like that, some type of antibiotic, send me
Yeah.
home. And then in between, like I would take the course of the antibiotics and then it would just keep coming back. And then when I couldn't get the antibiotics, I was in the pharmacy. I was getting whatever was available over the counter. And I got in this cycle where, I just started to accept that I guess this is what happens when you get a little bit older.
Mhm.
And then the other side of it is, I think in our culture, our is so medication minded that, it just seems normal. Well, there's a gazillion medications for this. I guess that's what it is. Everybody must have it. And look at all these things in the drugstore. That's why it's there, because everybody's got this. And weirdly, you just get to this place of like acceptance of
Yeah.
feeling crummy all the time. And that becomes weirdly normal.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not normal what it was. And you know what the thing is? It was like those were all like those check engine lights that you were talking about.
Yeah.
It was like that was the alarm bells going, hey, something's happening, something's happening, something's happening. And the weirdest thing is like as those things were happening, it never occurred to me that they could be related to the same thing. Like,
Mhm.
think about it. If you get a rash, you may
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily assume it's related to, a sinus infection, or you might not think a sinus infection is related to a UTI, but
Yeah.
underneath it all, because our body works so synergistically together,
Mhm.
all of those things are rooted in the same thing. They're
Mm-hmm.
rooted in whole,
Yes.
Yeah.
so
Exactly.
yeah, so it's like a big part of it, I think, too, for people is, becoming like really aware, and don't settle. Like I got to the point where I settled. I settled for feeling exhausted all the time,
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
um, feeling sluggish. Of course, I was carrying around all that weight because I was full of toxins I didn't even know about, I'm feeling like it's normal just to be sick all the
Mm-hmm.
time. And you really don't have to live that way. It's really weirdly a choice that we have that we can actually make, but even better, we could do something about it, which is even better.
I love that you touched on a belief that a lot of people that I've talked to have, as far as saying, oh, it's because of my age. This is why this is happening. It's, I've reached that time in my life where this is just what happens to people. And again, as you said, accepting that this is just the reality that I'm in now.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to accept that. You don't have to listen to everyone else who's saying this is what's happening because I've reached whatever age. There's a reason for it. And I think it's really important to stress that point that that belief is not true. You don't have to believe what everyone else is saying.
Yeah.
That's
We're hearing it from people now, like in their early 30s, too,
Yeah,
right?
which
If
is
you're
insane.
like just turning 30, 32, 33, and you're like, oh, well, this is just a normal part of aging. What happens in 10 years and 20 years and 30?
Mhm.
Like, start taking care of your body now. And we're
Yeah.
such a, like you said, from a society perspective, we're such a go, 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 get shit done society that it's you just push through things.
Mhm.
What can I take to make these symptoms not such of a pain in the butt so that I can continue doing all the things that I need to do? Which I understand. We have busy lives, but this is a time younger and younger as well that it's like we need to start focusing on health and
Mhm.
giving our body what it needs and looking when the check engine light is saying there's something going on here because that's not going to just stay the same.
Mhm.
Like,
no,
oh, I've got some brain fog. Okay, well, I'll just have to deal with that. Well, no, because brain fog turns into sluggishness, turns into weight gain, turns into
Or
potentially
memory
cancer,
issues. Yeah.
memory issues, all the other things, the health
yeah,
problems, because your body's like, yo, I'm trying to get your attention and you're ignoring me,
Yeah.
and more things just start to happen,
it's
right?
true.
So
Yeah,
I think
When
it's
you're
great
mentioning
that
these
you've,
things that are common, have become common, but they're
hmm
not normal.
yeah,
right,
exactly,
right.
exactly.
So true.
So, okay, so let's talk about cancer again a little bit and let's get into some preventative stuff for people because I think we've given some good information and anyone, like I kind of said from the beginning, it's good to have awareness of these things. Even if you hear this and you think, "Oh, I don't have breast cancer. I don't have cancer. That doesn't affect me." Knowing, having some knowledge of this like you had with the woman who had I'm trying to remember what she said. The woman who had said to you like I told them don't take my lymph nodes out.
Hmm.
right? And at first you were like, what? Why? And
Yeah.
then hearing that, that made a big difference for you when you went through that experience because it was like, huh, maybe I should look more seriously at that,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
So why do some women develop cancer and others don't? Can you speak on that?
Yeah. To be honest with you, the reason why some get it and some don't really has to do with your immune system. I know we talked a lot of, well, we touched on that before, but that really is the big key because if your immune system is working optimally,
Hmm.
then your body, your T cells and your B cells, your white blood cells, that's your team. That's their job. They're called T killer cells for a reason. They go around and they kill that stuff. And if your immune system is working optimally, you will have a strong enough defense when something crops up. I
Hmm.
think it's important too, like as you mentioned that you asked that question because as I mentioned before, it's important to realize that stuff happens in the body before you could even detect it, which is why being more aware of what's going on with your body is a big key.
Hmm.
If you're noticing things like that, even if you're not diagnosed with something, that's the time to take a look and see what it is that you could be doing to find out what might be triggering that and then taking appropriate actions so that way you can address it and then your body can resolve it. But you got to take an active part in that. And like women, I'm not saying like the whole point of that was that, like some women will develop breast cancer and others won't. There is like a very small percentage that's, I think it's like less than 10% that's associated to hereditary risk, stuff like the BRCA gene that everybody's
Hmm.
heard about. But that means 90% of us.
Hmm.
And then the reason why some people will develop the breast cancer and some won't is because their bodies are compromised. So it's really key to start to address those things in your own body so that way your body can resolve them and then you don't have to really worry about whether or not you're going to develop breast cancer in the future for sure. I think stress is another big factor with that one too,
Hmm.
because stress is a driver that actually suppresses your immune function.
Hmm.
And I didn't know that either. And I was one of those people, stressed out, workaholic, like Kate was saying, go, 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 get the
Hmm.
stuff done. I
Yep.
don't have time. I don't have time
Yeah.
to sleep. I don't have time to eat right. I don't have time to exercise. I don't want to exercise. I don't have time and I don't care. I just got to get this stuff done, but
Yep.
really what in the that was actually just compounding everything, compounding my poor diet, compounding my lack of exercise.
Hmm.
That stress compounded it because it was totally shutting off my immune system. And then I was walking around without any defense system at all. So that's really honestly what the cause is in a nutshell. I know that sounds simplistic, but it's true.
Yeah, but simplistic is good. And sometimes
Hmm.
people are looking for really big, shiny, fancy things, and it's like, really, it's not.
Yeah,
It's easier than you think, which is great.
true. So
Hmm.
true.
Yeah. What's in the body that shouldn't be there? And how can we
That's
support it rather than working against it?
that's so true. So
Hmm.
true.
And speaking of working with it, why do food choices matter when it comes to prevention? Because I like to focus more on prevention as opposed to after the fact. But I guess for those who are dealing with things, perhaps now who might be listening, how do you, is it different for every woman as far as what choices you make with them? Like, how do you decide what someone needs in order to help them get better?
That's a tricky one because it's got a lot of layers to it.
Of
A
course.
lot of it has to do with, as we were mentioning, toxicity that's going on in the body,
Hmm.
because that toxicity is going to be the thing that really compromises your immune system. So the what would be important to do at that point is to support your body's ability to detoxify, and you can do that with foods. Honestly, there's a lot of detoxifying foods that you can eat that can help to like take the burden off of
Mhm.
your organs that help to remove toxicity from the body. That's, like your liver, your kidneys, your skin, your colon, of course. And then, so that would be a key. Another key too, by making dietary changes, has to do with what kind of acidity is going on inside of your body. Because have an acidic state going on in your body, that's a body where any type of disease, especially cancer, wants to thrive. So it would be important to like alkalize your body, bring your acidity levels down through food. Water is a big key with that. And then on top of that, you're introducing foods that actually have scientific evidence behind them that they actually kill cancer cells. So when you do that and you make those dietary shifts, you're taking like a multi-pronged approach to enable your body to heal.
Yeah, I
Amazing.
think that's good. You're kind of attacking at all angles is how you can support the body and get it to a healthier place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And food's a big factor with that, because that's the whole thing, like we were saying before, everybody thinks that cancer is a genetic disease, but really it's an energetic disease. It has to do with, metabolism. And what's metabolism? That's a fancy word that means, like how does our body turn the food that we eat into energy, you
Mm-hmm.
know? So, and I always like to equate this when I talk to clients, like think about it. If you had, you know, buy the car of your dreams, whatever that is. It could be a Maserati, it could be whatever, it could be the high-end Tesla, it could be, I don't know, a BMW, it could be whatever. But if you save all this money to buy the car of your dreams and you bring it home, how are you going to care for that thing? You're going to I'll eat my hat if you don't do everything you can to make that car pristine, to give it a really good space in your garage, right, where it can be kept clean and perfect. Put the best kind of fuel in there so you can get the best performance out of that vehicle. You would do that. And it wouldn't matter to you how much money you spent on that gas because look at this car. I love this car, right? Your body is, and not just a car, your
Yeah.
body is that kind of vehicle. Your body is whatever your dream car is, that's your body. So you have to treat it that way, give it that type of fuel, give it that, super premium fuel that it needs. So that way it can create the right energy that it needs. So that way it can run smoothly, like your car would run on all cylinders. Then your body runs on all cylinders. And then your body has the ability to, eradicate diseases before they even start or
Yeah.
help you recover from them if you happen to have them. And it doesn't matter. I honestly, I'm a big, people might tell me I'm crazy, but I think it's true. I don't think it matters the type of disease. I mean, especially now today, well, cancer is one, but,
Mm-hmm.
even things like diabetes, which is so incredibly prevalent, you know, that's a reversible disease, no matter what people say. Maybe not type 1, but type 2 diabetes, which is like everywhere, is like that's actually reversible. A lot of things are reversible because your body has the capacity to do that if we give it the tool it needs to actually do it. So I think that's really the key. That's where the connection
Absolutely.
comes in.
Yeah.
Seeing type 2 diabetes in children,
Terrible.
that it's completely reversible. I
Right.
agree with that. I mean, autism, all of the different autoimmune, which was my
Mhm.
experience in the past, it's what is your body? The body is always trying to heal itself. And if
Yes.
it's not, what's getting in the way or what's missing,
Mhm.
right? And when we
Mhm.
can uncover those things, it makes a huge difference. And
Yeah.
medication's just trying to suppress the symptoms, tell the body, I'm not listening, shut up. And we need to start listening to our
Yeah.
bodies more because the
Yeah.
messages are trying to tell you what's going on and what it needs,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Um,
Definitely.
so you have a free guide, free resource that you
Yeah.
wanted to share. Can you tell us a little bit about that? We'll put the
Sure.
link in the show notes, but yeah.
Okay, sure. Yeah, it's a resource that I put together after I went through my experience, and my experience was like the turning point for me. It changed everything about my life, and it changed even my career path, and that's why I became a health coach because I really just
Mhm.
wanted to like tell people, what's possible for them. There's so much possible. And so anyway, I put together this resource because honestly, there were so many things I didn't know about cancer that I wish I had known before I was diagnosed. Because if I honestly believe if I had known these things, I could have avoided this disease in the first place. And so I thought it was important to kind of put those things out there. So it shares a little bit about my experience, and it also shares, five big things, five of the biggies for me that, were misconceptions that I had about breast cancer. And also it shares some things that people could start to do proactively. So that way they could start to, boost their immune function naturally every day. So that way they don't have to, worry about cancer in the future. And I know it's like, I'm kind of with you guys, I'm all about if I could help you prevent it, because I always feel like that, like why go through it if you don't have to? I mean,
Yep.
seriously, if there's a way to avoid it, why would you do it? Why would you go any other way, right? If there was a
Absolutely.
better way. And
Hmm.
so that was my goal in putting this together, to kind of help people so that way they can maybe, change their perspective on things like, what prevention really is, and
Hmm.
then, what kind of power they actually hold to, like, change the course of their health history, so to speak. So,
It's
yeah,
fantastic. I love that you're, and all of us are empowering people to, one, learn more information so they can make a more informed decision when it comes to these things with health. And then, yeah, that's probably the biggest thing, just empowering people so they can do better with their health and make those decisions, because it all starts right now and
absolutely.
even however many years ago.
Absolutely. And I
Hmm.
always tell people, it's like, don't wait. Like, I was
Hmm.
always of the mindset, if it isn't broken, I'm not going to mess with it, right? If I don't have to do anything about it, I don't need to fix anything, right? And the other side of that was, I always was a person who felt like it's going to be take too much effort and it's not going to make that much of a difference, right? And that could not be further from the truth, because the truth is that the minute that you start taking, proactive steps
Hmm.
toward, maybe being healthier or feeling better, or, toward, alleviating whatever condition you might be facing, as soon as you start taking the steps, your body starts responding, and it changes everything about the way that you feel, the way that you look. And it's so empowering.
Hmm.
And I tell people it's like the best kept secret. People are like, oh, I can't be bothered with that. And it's like, yeah, but you know what? You're missing out. You're
Hmm.
missing out on feeling really great. You're missing out on having energy. You're missing out on not feeling sick all the time. You're missing out on not having to go to the pharmacy every week. You're just missing out, and how much better, like, if you can affect that kind of positive change so that you can live your life that's, really vibrant and have energy to, like, do all the stuff that, you know, you want to do. Why would you wait? So I always tell people, don't wait. Don't wait. Don't wait until the doctor says, hey, you've got a problem, because you can circumvent that and just feel amazing for your life. And believe me, I'm 60 years old and I can honestly tell you it's true. So
Fantastic. I was going to ask you what was one last key message, but I feel like that was kind of it. Don't wait.
don't
Start
wait.
today.
Start today.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So just wanted to thank you so much for being on with us today. It was great having the conversation and learning more about just the journey you've been on and your journey being able to help other people find a different route, find maybe a healthier route that they can tackle anything that's coming their way when it comes to health. And just thinking differently, thinking outside the normal box that we've been thrown into all the time. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you. It was really my honor, and I really appreciate you guys giving me the chance to just share my story. So thank you.
Awesome. So if you're looking for anything to do with Barbara Walsh, if you'd like to work with her as a client, find out more, you can even go to her website and get this resource that she has, the 5 things I wish I've known before being diagnosed with breast cancer. Go check that out. We're going to put everything in the show notes. And thank you everyone for tuning in again this week. We had a great time, and thank you again, Barbara. We appreciate it. And if you would like to leave us a review, that would be great. We love getting this message out to people because we really need to get this message out. There is a way you can empower yourself to better health, and it's informing yourself, listening to different opinions out there, and what resonates for you. That's the biggest thing. Your body knows how to heal and how to get better. And it's a matter of tapping back into that and listening to what it's telling you. So thank you again for listening, everyone. We hope you have a great weekend, and we'll catch you on the next episode.